Every day, thousands of people brush past each other on the subway without a second thought. But when a 19-year-old girl on forearm crutches quietly asked a battle-hardened Navy SEAL if the seat beside him was taken, his combat-trained Belgian Malinois did something it had never done in years of explosions and chaos. It shifted into full guard mode, not because she was harmless, but because she wasn't. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The 4 train rattles through the tunnel like it always does at noon. Loud, indifferent, packed shoulder to shoulder with the particular midday crowd that has nowhere urgent to be and acts like it. Office workers eating lunch out of paper bags, teenagers hunched over phones. Like a woman with 2 strollers somehow occupying the space of 6 people. The car smells like coffee and rubber and the faint bite of something electrical that has been burning slowly for years. Amara Washington steps onto the train at 59th Street. She moves the way she always moves in crowded spaces. Carefully, not timidly. There is a difference, and she has spent years learning it. Her forearm crutches are matte black, the kind that wrap around the forearms rather than tuck under the armpits, and she navigates the gap between the platform and the car with the practiced muscle memory of someone who has crossed 1,000 such gaps. Her leg braces are visible below the hem of her jeans, low-profile carbon fiber, the kind that cost more than most people's rent and do the job without announcing themselves too loudly. She is 19, and slender with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of eyes that take everything in at once and give very little back. She scans the car the moment she boards. This is not anxiety, it is habit, the same way a carpenter walks into a room and immediately clocks the load-bearing walls. She needs a seat near the doors. She needs space for the crutches. She needs an aisle that won't require her to squeeze past 4 standing passengers who will all perform the same uncomfortable shuffle of not knowing whether to help or move or pretend they don't see her. The car is crowded, but not full. There are seats available near the middle. She starts toward them, and then she stops. Not because of the man, because of the dog. The dog is a Belgian Malinois. Not the kind of animal you mistake for a German Shepherd up close, though most people make that mistake from a distance. He is lean and compact and the color of a harvest field, with a dark muzzle and ears like 2 perfect triangles, and he is sitting on the floor beside his handler with the particular stillness that well-trained working dogs have. Not sleepy stillness, not relaxed stillness, but the stillness of a machine that is running at full capacity and simply has nothing to act on yet. His vest says, "Service Dog." Do not pet in clear yellow letters. The handler is a man in his late 30s. He is sitting with his back angled toward the car wall, a position that looks casual to anyone not paying attention, but which gives him a clean line of sight to both doors. He is wearing dark jeans and a gray long-sleeve shirt. Nothing remarkable. But he wears his clothes the way former military men sometimes do, not with vanity, but with a kind of efficiency, as if his body is a tool he keeps in working order, and clothing is simply its maintenance kit. His hair is a light brown going to sandy gray at the temples. His jaw is the kind that looks like it was put together without a single wasted angle. His name is Garrett Wynn, and he has not made eye contact with a single person on this train since he boarded, and yet Amara would bet everything she has that he could describe every one of them in detail. The dog's name is Huck, and the moment Amara steps onto the train, Huck's head turns. Not gradually, not with the sleepy curiosity of a dog who heard a sound. The movement is precise and immediate, a full rotation from forward-facing to locked on. The way a security camera repositions when motion is detected. His ears lift, his neck straightens, every muscle in his body reorganizes from still to ready in the span of a single breath. He is not growling, he is not barking, he is not showing teeth, he is reading her. Amara sees it happen, and she doesn't look away from him. She holds his gaze for a moment, steady, level, the way you would look at someone who had just said something you needed to consider. And then she continues moving toward the empty seat beside Garrett Wynn, because it is the best seat in the car for her needs, and she is not going to change course because a dog looked at her. She stops at the edge of the row. "Is this seat taken?" Her voice is quiet, but not small. She is asking the man, looking at the man, but she is aware of the dog at the edge of her peripheral vision the entire time. Garrett Wynn looks up at her. His expression doesn't shift much. There's a reading quality to it, the same quality the dog has, like the question she actually asked is not the one he is answering. He opens his mouth, and Huck moves. Not aggressively. He doesn't lunge or snap or even make a sound. He simply shifts his body, repositions from a loose sit beside Garrett's left leg to a deliberate placement directly between Garrett and the space where Amara would sit. His posture changes. His weight drops slightly forward onto his front paws. His eyes don't leave her. It is, unmistakably, guard position. Garrett closes his mouth. He looks at Huck. Then he looks at Amara with something that is not quite surprise, more like recalibration. "Go ahead," he says. Amara sits. She settles her crutches against the wall of the car and rests her hands on her knees and does not flinch, does not shift away from the dog, does not perform any of the things people sometimes perform when they want to show they are not afraid. She simply sits, and after a moment she glances down at Huck and says, very quietly, "It's okay. I won't hurt him." Huck does not relax. His eyes stay on her with that same unbroken, calculating attention. His breathing is even. His body is still. But there is a quality to his stillness now that is different from what it was before she boarded. It has acquired direction. It has acquired purpose. Around them, the train keeps moving, and the passengers keep doing what passengers do. But the small radius of this interaction has started to draw the particular sideways attention that public discomfort always generates. A woman 2 rows down pulls her small son a half-inch closer without seeming to notice she is doing it. A man in a business jacket has his phone tilted at a very specific angle that suggests he is either reading something interesting or recording something he will later post with a caption about dangerous dogs on public transit. Someone mutters something that contains the words "should be muzzled" and does not specify which participant in this tableau they mean. Garrett raises one hand, a small gesture, palm out, not dramatic. It is the gesture of someone who has used their hands to mean things for a long time. He doesn't react without reason, he says, not to Amara, to the car in general. And his voice is even and carries the particular weight of someone accustomed to being believed. The murmuring doesn't stop exactly, but it changes character. Now the unease is distributed differently, no longer focused on the dog, but stretched across the situation as a whole, which is somehow more uncomfortable. Amara watches all of this from the corner of her eye. She has catalogued the muttering man, the filming man, the woman with the child. She has noted the position of every standing passenger within 8 feet. She has registered the way Garrett Wynn's hand came up and the way the car responded to it. She sits very still, and her hands are loose in her lap. And then, for just a moment, no longer than a slow blink, her right hand tightens around the forearm cuff of her crutch. Not a flinch, not a grip of fear or pain. Or the tendons in her wrist rise and her knuckles shift and the cuff creaks faintly under a pressure that is deliberate and then released, like a breath taken and held and let go. Garrett Wynn catches it. He doesn't look at her directly when he does. His gaze is forward, professionally vague, and yet something in his jaw shifts. A micro-adjustment, a slight refocus behind the eyes that says the information has been received and filed. That is not the grip of someone frightened. That is the grip of someone exercising restraint. A few stops pass. The train empties slightly. Huck has not moved from his position, still angled between the two of them, still watching Amara with that precise, unreadable attention, The dog has been in combat zones. He has gone through building entries with bullets in the air and not flinched. He once held a downstay in a room where a flashbang went off 20 feet away and didn't break position. He has seen and smelled and processed more genuine threat than most humans will encounter in 10 lifetimes. He is treating this 19-year-old girl on crutches as the most significant variable in this environment. Garrett is trying to understand why. He keeps his voice low when he speaks, pitched to carry only as far as the two of them. "You always make dogs nervous?" She doesn't answer immediately. She is looking at the route map above the door, the little colored lines and their dots, the geography of the city laid out in flat primary colors, and there is something in the quality of her attention to it that suggests she is not really looking at it at all. And then she says, "Only the trained ones." The words sit in the air between them. Garrett looks at her properly now. Not the surveillance look, not the operational scan, but direct, with a quality of attention that is almost like respect. Something about those 4 words has reached past whatever professional distance he keeps in public and landed somewhere more considered. Huck, as if in response to attention only he can measure, shifts his body another few degrees. He is not between them anymore. He is slightly in front of Garrett, a subtle repositioning, the difference between a wall and a shield, protecting him from her. They ride in silence for 2 stops. The train begins to decelerate for the 86th Street station. The doors about to open, the car preparing to exhale half its passengers onto the platform, and Amara moves. She stands, and she stands quickly. For someone in leg braces and forearm crutches, the movement has no business being as smooth as it is. There is a split second where her weight transfers in a way that doesn't quite follow the expected physics of her assistive equipment. A recovery that is faster than a stumble has any right to be. An adjustment that looks almost like something was suppressed rather than simply maintained. She gets her crutches under her, and she is upright and balanced in the time it would take most people to decide to stand. Garrett notices. Huck's ears flatten and then rise. Amara turns to face them. She is not looking at Garrett with apology or explanation. She is looking at him with the specific, calm expression of someone delivering information they know will be used. You should get off at the next stop," she says, and then she steps off the train at 86th Street, and the doors close behind her, and she is gone. Garrett sits. He looks at Huck. Huck is still staring at the closed doors with total concentration. Not at the doors as doors, at the space where she was. His ears are up, his tail is flat, his weight is balanced forward, the way it goes when he is tracking something he cannot see. Then, 2 cars ahead, a voice rises sharply, a male voice, the kind that has already crossed some internal threshold, followed by the sound of someone else responding and the particular rhythm of an argument with its own momentum. Passengers shift, necks crane. Someone near the door between cars says something tight and worried. Garrett's training kicks in automatically. Posture changes. Sightlines are assessed. Escape routes are prioritized. And somewhere in the middle of that reflex, her words are still there. "You should get off at the next stop." She said it like she already knew what was coming, like the argument 2 cars ahead is exactly where she expected the noise to be. The argument blows over by the time the train pulls into 96th Street, which is how arguments on trains usually go. A transit officer boards, does a circuit, finds nothing requiring action beyond presence. Passengers who had tensed up let their shoulders back down. The man who had been filming stops filming. Garrett does not get off at the next stop. He has a reason, or something he tells himself is a reason, which is that a standing warning without context is not operationally actionable. You don't redirect your movement based on 4 words from a stranger. That's the argument he makes to himself while remaining in his seat, but he keeps hearing it. You should get off at the next stop. It wasn't phrased as advice. It was phrased as the last line of a briefing, the part where someone who has already processed all the information hands you the conclusion and trusts you to do something with it. At 125th Street, 3 plainclothes transit officers board from the middle doors. Garrett clocks them in the first 2 seconds. The way their eyes go to faces rather than phones, the practiced casualness that is neither fully relaxed nor alert enough to be readable as either, the slight bulge under the jacket of the one on the left. They are not writing. They are looking. He watches them work the car, slow, methodical. The way you do when you are checking for a specific face rather than general disorder, and something tightens along the back of his neck. They get off at the next stop without speaking to anyone. Garrett stays seated for another 2 stops, thinking. Then he pulls out his phone. He has a contact at Transit Authority, a former Army CID investigator named Brady, who now does intelligence coordination for the MTA's counterterrorism unit, which sounds like it shouldn't be a thing, but is very much a thing in a city this size. Brady picks up on the second ring. "I need you to tell me if anything was running on the 4 line this afternoon," Garrett says. "High-value transit, protected movement, anything in the 59th to 125th corridor." There is a pause on Brady's end that lasts long enough to mean yes. "Where are you getting that?" Brady says. "I got a warning on the train. Girl, maybe 18, 19, told me to get off before the transit team came through." Another pause. "That sweep was supposed to be clean. Witness transfer coordination. We had a federal asset moving through Grand Central on foot support. They were using the transit network as a decoy layer to draw any surveillance eyes off the vehicle." "Someone knew," Garrett says. "Someone knew something," Brady says. "Careful. Doesn't mean your girl was part of it." "I know," Garrett says. He hangs up and sits with that knowledge for a moment. Because Brady is right. Someone knowing that a transit sweep was running doesn't mean she was attached to whatever the sweep was looking for. She could have known because she had contacts in Transit Authority. She could have known because she was observant enough to read the pattern of something that had been building on that line for the past hour. She could have known because she was entirely uninvolved and simply very, very good at reading situations. The problem is that all 3 of those explanations still require something that the average 19-year-old on crutches doesn't have. He kneels beside Huck that evening in the apartment. A habit they have, a debrief of sorts, the way working partners sit down after something unexpected and go over what happened. Huck is on his mat, relaxed now, eating his meal. Garrett sits on the floor beside him with one hand resting lightly on the dog's flank and speaks the way he sometimes does, low and thinking out loud. "You weren't scared of her," he says. You weren't alerting to a threat she was about to do. You were reading her." Huck exhales through his nose. Not a huff of disagreement, not a sigh of boredom, but the particular sound he makes when something that has been processing reaches some kind of internal resolution. Garrett has learned to read it over years of working together. It's the sound Huck makes when the answer is yes, and he has decided that confirmation has been earned. "What were you reading?" Garrett says. Huck looks at him. "You were reading her the same way you read a handler," Garrett says, working it through. "You weren't treating her like a threat. You were treating her like another operative." He says the last word slowly, because it sounds absurd, applied to someone who looked like a college student with medical equipment. And yet it is the only word that fits what he saw. Huck finishes his dinner. It takes Garrett most of the evening to pull together what he can through legitimate channels. Station exit footage is not something he can access directly. He is former military, not law enforcement, and his current position as a private security consultant gives him relationships rather than access. But Brady calls him back just before 9 with a still image pulled from the 86th Street station camera, and Garrett stands in his kitchen looking at it on his phone. She is clear in the frame. Forearm crutches, leg braces, close-cropped hair, the slightly upward angle of someone who has just come off a train and is already looking ahead. She is not looking at the camera. She has the frame-aware quality of someone who knows where cameras are. The angle of her face suggests she was never going to be fully front-on to this particular one. Brady has run the image through what he can run it through. No hits in any system he has access to, which tells Garrett either that she has no record, or that her record is in a system Brady can't reach, or that whoever would put her in a file has not done so yet. Clean, Brady says, which is its own kind of interesting. Exit point? Garrett asks. She went west out of the station. I lose her on Amsterdam 2 blocks up. She steps into a building entrance, and then I don't have the angle. Which building? Brady gives him the cross street. Garrett looks at it on a map. There is a medical clinic on that block, a community health center that handles chronic condition management, physical therapy, specialist referrals. It is the kind of clinic that would see someone regularly for a long-term physical condition. It is also the kind of building that has multiple exits. He debates with himself for longer than he would like to admit. He has no active assignment. There is no professional imperative here. A girl on a train said something that turned out to be accurate, and a well-trained dog reacted to her in a way that doesn't have a clean explanation. That is the totality of what he has. But Garrett Wynn did not get to where he was by dismissing things that didn't have clean explanations. He got here by following the explanations that weren't clean until they became clear. Well, he gets up the next morning and goes to the clinic. He arrives at 9:15. He does not go inside. He finds a spot at a coffee cart across the street with a clean sight line to the entrance, orders something he doesn't particularly want, and waits. He doesn't have to wait long. She comes out at 9:40, and she spots him before he has finished adjusting his position, which tells him something he was already beginning to suspect. She sees him from across the street in less than the time it should take to identify a specific face from 25 yards away in morning foot traffic. Her stride doesn't change. Her face doesn't change. She doesn't look away to pretend she hasn't seen him. She crosses the street. He stays where he is. Huck beside him. Paul makes no movement, but his posture shifts into that same aligned attention from the day before. Not the full guard position. Something adjacent to it. Something that could become either. She stops in front of him with the kind of unhurried steadiness that takes a great deal of something. Discipline, practice, a particular relationship with fear to achieve. She looks at him for a moment. At Huck. Back at him. "You didn't listen," she says. Her voice has the same quality it had on the train. Not accusatory, not surprised. Informational. The way you say "I told you it would rain when it rains," not as a point of personal victory, but because the fact of it is simply there. "You're right," Garrett says. "I didn't." She looks at him, and something in her expression shifts. Very slightly. Almost imperceptibly. Way like a recalibration, because that was not apparently the answer she expected. Huck leans forward very slightly and rests the front of his muzzle against the back of her right hand. Not aggressively, not investigatively, not even with the tentative sniffing approach of a dog being introduced to a new person. He simply places his chin there for 2 seconds with the matter-of-fact quality of something decided, and then lifts his head again. Garrett watches this and says nothing. The morning traffic moves around them, indifferent to the three of them standing at this coffee cart, having what is either an extremely small conversation or an extremely significant one, depending on what happens next. The morning foot traffic keeps moving around them, and neither of them speaks for a moment after Huck lifts his head. The dog settles back into his sit, posture easier than yesterday, though his eyes stay on Amara with that same layered attention. Less like a threat assessment now, and more like a problem he is still working out. Garrett waits. He has learned over a long career of extracting information from situations that did not want to give it up, that silence is one of the most useful tools available. People fill silence. They always fill it. Even people trained not to fill it eventually do, because the pressure of an unresolved moment is something the human brain finds nearly intolerable. Amara lets the silence sit for a beat longer than most people would. Then she says, "He's not protecting you from me. He's reacting to what's coming." Garrett looks at her steadily. "Which is?" "I don't know yet." That's the honest answer. She glances down at Huck briefly, then back up. But something in the pattern is moving. Has been for about 6 days. Your dog picked up on it the same way I do. The pressure of a thing before it breaks the surface. Garrett sets his coffee down on the cart's edge. "Walk with me," he says. She doesn't say yes, but she turns and starts walking, and he falls into step beside her, Huck on his left, Amara slightly ahead, using the crutches in the rolling, efficient rhythm of someone who has been doing this long enough that it has stopped requiring conscious effort. They walk half a block before he speaks again. "The sweep yesterday," he says. "Federal witness transfer, decoy routing through the transit network. You knew it was running." "I knew something official was running." I didn't know the specific designation." She navigates around a man standing in the middle of the sidewalk, looking at his phone. "There were indicators on the line for 3 days before it. Personnel movement patterns, timing clusters at certain stations, the kind of micro-adjustments in platform behavior that happen when people are trying very hard to look like they aren't coordinating." "You were watching platform behavior?" "I watch everything." She says it without pride, without apology. "I've been doing it for 2 years. It started as something I couldn't turn off, and I decided to make it useful." They reach the end of the block, and she stops at the corner, turning to face him with that same quality of directness she has had since the train. As if she decided somewhere along the way that the specific effort of pretending to be less than she is costs more than it's worth. "I have a neurological condition," she says. "It affects mobility. You've seen that. It also does something else. The same neural pathways that are disrupted in some areas are overbuilt in others. Pattern recognition, spatial memory. I can hold a large number of variables in motion simultaneously and track how they relate to each other. I can't always explain how I know something is building. I just know." Garrett watches her face while she says this. She is not performing the speech. She has clearly given some version of it before and been met with a range of responses. Skepticism, pity, our performative fascination. And she has stripped away any appeal to emotion that might invite any of those responses. She is just handing him the facts. "How long have you had it?" he asks. "Since I was 12. The condition, I mean. I had the ability longer than that. I just didn't know what it was." "You predicted something before," he says. It's not quite a question. She is quiet for a moment. They have stopped at a corner, waiting for the light, and she watches the cross traffic with that outward-facing attention that never quite stops. "I was 16, she says. There was a fire in my building. I'd been watching the smoke alarm pattern in the hallway for 3 days. There was a unit 2 floors up with a wiring issue. The alarm would chirp at intervals that didn't match any normal test cycle, and the timing was shortening. I told the building manager. He thanked me politely and did nothing. The light changes. She starts forward. At 2 in the morning, 4 days later, the electrical fire started in that unit. We got everyone out in time because I had already told my guardian exactly what to do when it happened." "And before that?" "What do you mean?" "You said you had the ability longer than the diagnosis, before the fire." She is quiet for a half block. "I used to think everyone saw things the way I did," she says finally. "I thought everyone noticed that the man at the end of the street came home at different times, depending on what day of the week it was, or that the bus was always 3 minutes late when the weather had been dry for more than 4 days, or that 2 people who acted like strangers were communicating through timing rather than contact." A pause. "I was about 9 when I realized they didn't." Garrett thinks about what that would be like, 9 years old, carrying a processing load that no one around you shares and no one has named. He thinks about what you do with that when you don't have language for it yet. "What are you tracking now?" he says. She stops walking. They are in front of a small park. Benches, a few trees still bare from winter, a couple of pigeons who have strong opinions about a discarded pretzel. She turns to face him fully. "Sit down," she says. "I'll show you." He has run situational assessment exercises with Navy personnel, intelligence contractors, specialist analysts costing more per hour than most people earn in a week. He has never done this. She asks him questions, rapid, contextual, not preambled. "You boarded at 59th Street yesterday. What was the platform occupancy when you boarded?" "Moderate, 40, maybe 45 people." "How many were at the south end of the platform?" he thinks. 7, no, 8. One of them left the bench right before the train came in." "The man who left the bench, where did he board?" "Third car." "Same car as us?" "No, one forward." She nods once. "Now, last Thursday, same station, same time of day. What was different?" He blinks. "That's specific." "Yes." He goes back through it. Thursday. He goes to the 59th Street station 3 or 4 times a week. It is his most common entry point, depending on which client meeting he is coming from. Last Thursday. He tries to reconstruct it, and he is honestly surprised by how much he finds. The security presence was heavier. One of the maintenance crew I've seen before wasn't there. There was a new vendor at the newsstand. "The new vendor?" she says. "What did he look like?" Garrett describes him. Amara nods slowly and opens the bag she has been carrying, a worn canvas tote, the kind that goes everywhere and accumulates a specific personal gravity. She pulls out a tablet, calls up a photo, and turns it to face him. It is the vendor. "He was there Monday too," she says, "and the Tuesday before that. He moves the stand. The location shifts by platform, but the pattern of when he appears tracks against 2 specific routing windows that I've been following." She pulls up a map, a transit map with overlaid markings, handwritten in 2 colors, dense with notation. 3 weeks of movement data, 6 individuals, possibly more, using the transit network in a coordinated pattern that isn't random commerce or commuting. The spacing is too deliberate. The timing clusters too tightly. Garrett takes the tablet carefully and looks at the map. He knows how to read operational planning documents. He knows how to read surveillance logs and movement analysis and route exploitation assessments. What she has built by hand on a transit map in 2-color pen over 3 weeks of solo observation is, in structure and in method, indistinguishable from the kind of pre-operational intelligence product a professional surveillance team would produce. He hands it back. "No one's listened to you," he says. She takes the tablet. "I don't have credentials. I'm 19. And I use crutches, and I live with my guardian in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I don't have a government ID that makes what I see mean something to people who need a reason to act." Garrett is quiet for a moment, then, "Your dog recognized it." She looks at him, confused for a fraction of a second before she understands. "Huck. He didn't read you as a threat. He read you as a detector. Same processing signature, maybe, as another trained operator." Garrett looks at Huck, who is sitting at his side watching Amara with the calm, considering attention of someone who has already reached a conclusion and is simply waiting for the conversation to catch up. He knows what threat scanning looks like from the inside. Amara looks at the dog for a long moment. "I kept thinking about why he reacted," she says quietly, almost to herself. "I thought maybe it was the equipment, or my movement pattern. I didn't think—" She stops. "He knew what you were," Garrett says, "before I did." Something in her face changes, very slightly, carefully, in the way that things change in a face that has practiced composure for a long time, and occasionally gets caught off guard by something it wasn't prepared for. She looks back down at her map. "I've been dismissed enough times," she says, that I stopped expecting the opposite. She says it without bitterness, just as fact, the way you state a weather condition. Garrett leans forward slightly, elbows on knees. "Tell me about the location," he says. "The one in 48 hours. She turns the tablet back to face him and points. There is a moment later, after she has walked him through the location data, after he has asked 23 questions in a row and she has answered all of them without hesitation or guessing, always distinguishing cleanly between what she knows and what she infers and what is still incomplete, when he sits back and looks at her. "If you're wrong," he says, "people panic, resources move. It's expensive and it damages credibility for any future warning." "I know," she says, "and if you're right?" She looks at the transit map. Then she looks up. "Then we were the only two people who knew, and we did something about it, and that's enough." Garrett thinks about his teammates, about the mission where the intelligence was there, and the decision not to act was made anyway, and 3 men who should be alive aren't. He doesn't speak about it, but it moves through him like weather, familiar, inarguable. "We don't have time," he says. "We never did," she says. "I've been watching this build for 3 weeks. Huck stands up from his sit without any cue from Garrett, a voluntary repositioning, unhurried, deliberate. He walks the 2 steps to where Amara is seated on the bench and sits beside her. Not in front of her. Not between her and Garrett. Beside her. He has, apparently, made his own decision about where things stand. 40 hours before Amara's predicted window, Garrett sits across from her at a table in the back of a diner 3 blocks from her building, and they plan. The location is a transit hub, a major interchange station where 3 subway lines and a regional rail connection feed into a common concourse, handling upward of 60,000 passengers a day at peak times. What it is the kind of space that exists in permanent controlled chaos, constant movement, constant noise, multiple levels, and access points, a security presence that is both substantial and diffuse. It is also, as Amara has mapped it in obsessive detail, the kind of space where a coordinated action carried out by people who know the environment would be nearly invisible until it was already complete. Garrett has made 2 calls. Careful ones, to people he trusts with his own life and has trusted for years. One is Brady, who is cautious but listening. The other is a former teammate named Marshall, now working federal contract security, who has the specific gift of taking outlandish information seriously without requiring it to be packaged in a way that flatters anyone's assumptions. Neither of them has been brought fully in. Garrett needs more before he does that. More specificity, more verifiable confirmation that what Amara has built over 3 weeks of solo observation is not an elaborate pattern that only exists because she needed one to exist. He doesn't believe that is the case, but he needs to be able to say to Marshall and to Brady that he has tested it. "Walk me through the timing again," he says. Amara has the map open between them, pinned under 2 coffee mugs. She has also, Garrett noticed when she arrived, performed a full circuit of the diner before sitting. Clocked every exit, assessed every occupant, chose the seat with the sightline she needed. She did this in the time it took him to hang up his jacket. She didn't explain it, and he didn't ask. "The clustering pattern repeats on a cycle," she says, pointing to notation on the map. "The intervals have been shortening. 3 weeks ago, the pattern recurred every 4 to 5 days. 2 weeks ago, it was every 3 days. Last week, it was every 2. She looks up. "The next window is tomorrow, between 10:15 and noon. The concentration of movement in the pattern points to the upper concourse, the regional rail level, specifically the northern end, where the service access corridors connect to the maintenance infrastructure." "The shortening interval," Garrett says. "Preparation ramp up." "That's my read. Whatever they are building toward has a fixed external date, something that isn't determined by them, a departure, a transfer, a scheduled event, and they are compressing their activity to meet it." "A departure," Garrett says, "or a handoff." She nods. The witness transfer that Brady mentioned, on the federal asset that was being moved through the city. Neither of them says it directly because neither of them has the confirmation yet, but it is sitting at the edge of the conversation like something half in shadow. Garrett sips his coffee. Amara is drinking tea, the specific kind he has noticed that she orders without looking at the menu, which means she has been here before and made her choice a long time ago. He calls Brady after they eat. Brady is not enthusiastic. Garrett expected this. Brady is a good analyst and a careful one, and careful analysts in positions of institutional accountability do not lean into unverified intelligence from uncredentialed civilians without at least the appearance of reluctance. "I can't move resources on this," Brady says. "Not with what you have." "I know. I'm not asking you to move resources. I'm asking you to tell me if there's anything in the existing observation data that supports the upper concourse at the northern end of the regional rail level as a point of interest." A pause, longer than Brady's usual pauses. "I'm going to pretend you didn't ask me that in a way that would require me to confirm or deny anything," Brady says. "I understand," Garrett says, "and I'm going to tell you hypothetically that if someone had been tracking movement in that terminal over the past 2 weeks, the Northern Service Corridor would be a location that had generated annotation in the data." Hypothetically, Brady says, and hangs up. Garrett looks at Amara across the table. "Your pattern is corroborated," he says. She receives this with no visible relief, which tells him she was not in serious doubt about it. What she says is, "Then why does that feel worse?" He knows why. He has felt it before, the particular weight of being right about something you hope to be wrong about. They go to the terminal the following morning at 9. It is a different kind of surveillance than what Amara has been doing alone for 3 weeks. She moves through the concourse with the unhurried, slightly indirect rhythm that makes a person difficult to consciously track, not skulking, not performing casualness, simply occupying the space in a way that doesn't accumulate attention. Garrett moves differently, the way people with operational backgrounds move in public, always with a destination, never hesitating, changing direction only with apparent purpose. Huck walks between them, marked clearly as a service dog, his vest doing the social work of explaining his presence to anyone who might otherwise find a working breed dog in a transit concourse notable. They have taken up positions at the northern end of the upper concourse. Amara at a bench against the wall, with a clear sight line across the main floor and toward the service corridor access point. Garrett at a newspaper stand 20 feet to her left, with an angle on the elevator bank and the stairs. For the first 40 minutes, nothing. Or rather, everything that should be there, in the correct proportions, behaving as it should. Commuters with luggage, a family with too many bags navigating toward the regional rail gates, station staff in their yellow vests, moving in the particular purposeful drift of people who know this space so completely they have stopped seeing it. Amara is doing something with her eyes that Garrett finds genuinely difficult to describe. She is not staring at any one thing. She is not tracking left to right in a scan pattern. She is holding the whole visual field in some kind of soft focus that seems to process the entire space as a single object, alert to deviations in the aggregate rather than individual events. At 9:47, she sends him a text. They are 20 feet apart but have decided that conversation draws more attention than two people on their phones. Second man from left at the gate queue, gray jacket. He arrived 11 minutes ago and hasn't moved toward boarding. Garrett finds the man without looking for him. The practiced art of locating a described subject without performing a search. Gray jacket, mid-40s. And standing in the queue for the regional rail gate in the particular stillness of someone who is not actually planning to board. He types back, confirmed. He's watching the service corridor. Her reply comes in 10 seconds. There's another one. Coffee cart, far end. He's been there since we arrived. His coffee is still full. Garrett shifts his position by 3 steps, angles, finds the coffee cart. The man is right. Cup on the edge of the cart. Not touched. Both exits from the service corridor, he types. Yes, she sends back. They are positioned at both ends of the service access. Watching it, not entering. Watching. They're waiting for something, he types. Her reply takes longer this time. He watches her from across the concourse. She has not moved, has not looked at her phone with any visible urgency. He is sitting with the particular surface stillness that he is beginning to understand is not composure so much as the external expression of very intensive internal processing. Not something. Someone, she sends. The service corridor connects to the platform approach for the 1022 northbound. That's a federal transit route today. It runs through the secured yard. Garrett looks at the time. It is 9:58. He is about to type back when something changes in the concourse. Not a sound, not a visible event, but a shift in the air pressure of the space. The specific change that happens when something that was latent becomes active. Huck, beside him, stands from his down position. Every muscle engages in that now familiar way. His head turns, his ears rise, hackles. Garrett follows the dog's gaze. A man in a maintenance uniform is coming through the far doors from the lower concourse, moving against the general direction of foot traffic, not rushing, not drawing attention, but moving with the directional certainty of someone who knows exactly where they are going and is not interested in anything else. He is carrying a service toolkit. His badge is clipped at his chest. From 20 feet away, Amara looks up. She looks directly at the man. Then she looks across at Garrett. Even from this distance, across a crowded concourse, in the noise and movement of 60,000 people's daily transit business, Garrett can read her face clearly. She whispers it to herself. He can see the shape of the words, and even without hearing it, he knows what she is saying. They're here. He presses send on the text to Marshall that he has had drafted for the last 20 minutes and starts moving. Garrett moves the way he was trained to move in a crowd, not against the flow, but through it, adjusting trajectory in micro-increments, occupying the spaces between people rather than displacing them. He is closing the distance to the maintenance uniform man without performing a pursuit, and anyone watching would see a man walking with quiet purpose toward the regional rail gates, service dog at his side. Nothing remarkable about any of it. Huck moves differently now. His body is low and forward-weighted, that same hackles-up stillness from the bench translated into motion. He is not pulling at the leash, not vocalizing, but every stride has an intentionality that Garrett can feel through the lead. The dog has a target and is working. Behind him, Garrett knows without looking that Amara has not moved from her bench. This was the agreement they reached without stating it explicitly. She is the eyes, the processing center, the voice in his ear. He is the reach. It is not a division that needs to be negotiated because it is simply the logical distribution of what each of them can do. His phone buzzes. He reads without breaking stride. 2 of them. Left side, near the pillar. One's pretending to check his phone. He's been stationary for 9 minutes. Didn't come in with foot traffic. Garrett locates the man at the pillar without appearing to look for him. Mid-30s, dark jacket, the very specific quality of stillness that belongs to someone who has trained themselves not to fidget. His phone is in his hand at chest height, but the screen is dark. The maintenance uniform man is 30 feet ahead, moving steadily toward the service corridor access. Then the food cart goes over. It happens at the south end of the concourse. A crash that is enormous in the way that only metal-hitting tile can be enormous in an enclosed space, followed by the secondary scatter of containers and the shout of the vendor and the immediate reflexive turning of every head in the building. It is the kind of sound that reaches into the most primitive layer of human attention and yanks it sideways, and within 4 seconds the center of gravity of the entire concourse has shifted south. Garrett does not turn his head. His phone buzzes twice in quick succession. That's not the attack. That's the cover. Don't stop. He doesn't stop. He closes the remaining distance to the maintenance uniform man in the next 30 seconds, while the concourse is still reorganizing itself around the spectacle at the south end. Security moving that direction, commuters craning, the vendor loudly recounting whatever had just happened to whoever was nearest. The man reaches the service corridor door and inputs a code at the keypad. Garrett comes in behind him just as the door begins to open, and he does not announce himself because there is nothing to announce. He simply moves into the man's space with the economy of someone who has done this in rooms that cost a great deal more than a transit concourse, and his hand comes down on the man's wrist as the door swings open. The man resists immediately. Not the flailing resistance of a civilian caught off guard. Trained resistance. See, the specific redistribution of weight and center of gravity that belongs to someone who knows what a wrist grab means and has a response to it already loaded. He drops his shoulder, tries to drive his elbow back, uses the door frame as a pivot point. The service corridor is narrow and gray and smells like concrete and electrical conduit, and the toolkit swings wide and hits the wall, and Garrett takes the impact across his left forearm and keeps his grip, and Huck launches. Not chaotically, with the controlled precision of a dog that has done this in conditions far less clean than a service corridor, a single movement that covers the 3 feet between them and brings the man down before the struggle can escalate into something that requires noise. The dog's weight is positioned for maximum effect. So his grip on the man's jacket shoulder pinning him against the wall, and then to the floor, and the man stops moving the way people stop moving when they realize that further movement will cost more than they want to pay. Garrett releases the wrist and takes the toolkit. Inside, beneath a layer of legitimate tools arranged with the deliberateness of someone who had thought about what this bag needed to look like, is a device. It is compact, matte gray, with 2 leads coiled flat against its base and a digital interface that is currently blank. It is not improvised. It has been manufactured with the care of something meant to be specific and quiet. Garrett photographs it without touching the leads. His phone buzzes. What is it? He types back a description. The reply takes 11 seconds, long enough that he knows she is running it against something. Not random placement. That's targeted signal disruption. It would knock out the encrypted communication relay on the Federal Transit route. Anyone riding that route in the secure configuration wouldn't be able to call out and couldn't be reached. It isolates the car. Garrett looks at the man on the floor. Huck is still positioned over him with the flat-eared authority of a working dog that has not been called off. The man is looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone running their own internal calculations. Around them, on the other side of the service corridor door, Garrett can hear the concourse beginning to normalize. The food cart incident passing from emergency to anecdote, security drifting back to their positions, yet the crowd settling into the rhythm of moving somewhere. The man on the floor smiles. It is not the smile of someone afraid. It is small and precise, more like an acknowledgement than an expression, and it reaches his eyes in a way that means something specific. You going to call it in? The man says. Already done, Garrett says. The man's smile does not change. Then you should make sure you called the right people. His phone buzzes again before Garrett can answer that, and the message that comes in makes him go still. Upper level. The second one from the pillar. He's gone. I lost him 6 minutes ago, and I only just realized it. I was watching the cart incident, and he moved during it. Then, 10 seconds later, Garrett. This was wrong. This was set up for us to find. He looks at the man on the floor, whose smile has not moved. This whole setup, the visible watchers, the obvious uniform, the cart distraction, it was constructed to be interceptable. Someone wanted this to be found. Someone wanted us here. Garrett crouches down until he is at eye level with the man. You're the distraction, he says. The man says nothing, which is its own kind of confirmation. Amara's next message comes in while he is still reading the man's face. I don't know where yet. I'm running the pattern. Give me 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Garrett sits back on his heels and looks at the device in the toolkit and thinks about what you build a distraction this sophisticated to draw attention away from, and what it means that whoever built it knew enough about how an interception would happen to construct it in exactly the right shape. They knew someone would come. They built something findable for that person to find, and while that person was finding it, they were already somewhere else. The 4 minutes pass. Garrett has secured the man with a zip restraint from the kit he carries and has sent a precise, minimal text to Marshall that contains the service corridor location, one photograph of the device, and the words "Hold for federal pickup." Do not move the device. Marshall replies in 30 seconds with 2 letters on it. Whatever Marshall is doing or wherever he is, he will handle the chain of custody. He steps back into the concourse. Amara is already off the bench, moving toward him, and her face has the particular quality of someone who has just solved something and found that the solution is worse than the original problem. She moves quickly, not recklessly, but with the compressed efficiency of someone who has set aside the careful economy of energy that her mobility requires and is spending whatever the moment demands. "Tell me," he says, "the pattern I've been tracking for 3 weeks. I've been reading it as a convergence on the transit network. Movement clustering around specific lines, specific times." She stops walking. They are in the middle of the concourse, and the crowd is flowing around them, and she does not seem to notice. "I was right about the convergence. I was wrong about the target. The transit network was never the target." Garrett waits. The movement pattern I've been watching isn't preparation for an action here. It's preparation for an action at the point where the transit network intersects with the next step in the federal witness protocol. She looks at him, and there is something in her eyes that is not fear, but is adjacent to it. The specific quality of someone who has made a wrong turn in the dark and is now tracking backward as fast as they can to find where it happened. The federal asset that Brady mentioned, the high-value witness, they're not moving through the transit system. They moved, past tense. They're already at the next location. The next location. Garrett thinks about what comes after a transit decoy operation, where you put someone when you're done using the transit network as a diversion, where the witness goes once the mobile phase is over, and they need to be stationary. Somewhere controlled, he says. Somewhere with existing infrastructure, existing cover, existing reason for personnel to come and go without pattern. The hospital, Amara says. The University Medical Center on the east side. There's a secure transfer unit on the 4th floor. I've been past it. I know the access configuration. It handles federal patients under protection. The paperwork trail I've been building. She is already pulling the tablet from her bag. 3 of the individuals in my movement pattern made visits to that hospital in the last 10 days. Not to the public wards, to the administrative annex, which shares a service corridor with the 4th floor transfer unit. She turns the tablet to face him. The map, her hand-annotated transit map, has been updated. She has added nodes, connections, a thread of inference that runs from the transit hub they are standing in all the way to a building 12 blocks east. He studies it for 5 seconds. "When?" he says. "The window we were watching here closes in 40 minutes. The next opening in the Federal Transport Protocol, the one that would allow a witness transfer or a witness interview, is in 2 hours. She meets his eyes. If they're going to act during a genuine operational window, it's the next one. 2 hours. Garrett calls Brady as they are already moving toward the exit, Huck between them, the 3 of them cutting through the concourse with the synchronized efficiency of people who have been working together for much longer than 2 days. Brady answers on the first ring, which means he has been waiting. "Tell me you're about to explain the chatter I'm getting from the Federal Transit Unit," Brady says. "Your asset at the medical center," Garrett says. "4th floor transfer unit. You need to make a call." A silence. Be longer than any Brady has given him yet. How do you know about the medical center? Same way I knew about yesterday's sweep, Garrett says. Make the call, Brady. We're 12 minutes out. Brady hangs up without saying yes or no. Amara, walking beside him, says quietly, I missed it. I had all of it in front of me for 3 weeks, and I still read the end point wrong. You caught it before it happened, Garrett says. That's what matters. I nearly sent us somewhere that wasn't Amara. He says her name with a weight that is not unkind, firm, the way you speak to someone who is beginning to spin a wheel that won't help them. You're running it right now, and you caught the correction. In real time. That's not a failure. That's exactly what this is supposed to look like. She is quiet for 2 strides. Then she looks at Huck, who is moving with them stride for stride, and she says, barely audible, okay. The taxi takes 9 of the 12 minutes. The last 3 they walk, coming in from the south side of the medical center block, where the street is quieter, and the pedestrian approach gives them time to assess the building's exterior without announcing arrival. The University Medical Center is large, a complex of connected buildings that has grown organically over decades, adding wings and annexes and connecting corridors in the way that large urban hospitals do, until the original structure is merely the oldest layer of something much more layered. The main entrance faces east. The administrative annex, which Amara indicated, is accessed from the north side through a secondary lobby that is technically public, but sits behind 2 sets of badge access doors beyond the reception point. Garrett knows medical center security configurations. He has worked hospital protection details. He knows what the badge doors mean. Not that the space behind them is impenetrable, but that access leaves a record, which means people who want to move through that space invisibly use channels that don't leave one. Service entrance, he says. Amara nods. She has already identified it, the loading dock on the west side, recessed slightly, where a vehicle could pull up under the building's overhang without being visible from the street. There are 2 cameras on the approach, both angled toward the dock itself, with a narrow corridor of approach from the south that sits between them. They come in through that corridor. The service entrance is not locked during the day. Delivery schedules make permanent locking impractical, and the interior beyond it is a wide, low-ceiling service corridor that runs the width of the building's western wall. It smells like industrial cleaner and the particular sealed air quality of a building that recirculates everything. Fluorescent lights, evenly spaced. Equipment carts parked along one wall. A housekeeping station to the left. Everything is normal, which Garrett has learned over a career is the thing to be most alert to. Huck is working. Not at the heightened state of the transit corridor, not the hackles and the forward weight, but at a steady, focused alert that means the dog has input and is processing it. His nose is moving in the slight, a constant way it does when there is something to track, and he is running it against the air with the patience of an animal that has learned to trust information that takes time to develop. Amara is 3 steps ahead of Garrett, moving with an unhurried directness through the service corridor. She has been here before, not this wing, but the configuration is familiar enough from the patient visits she referenced, and she is reading the building the way she reads everything. As a system with internal logic, whose deviations are visible if you know what baseline looks like. She stops. Garrett stops behind her. Huck goes still. That man, she says low. Her chin angles slightly toward a figure 30 feet ahead, hospital staff, wearing the pale gray uniform of the administrative services team, moving away from them down the corridor with a pace that is neither fast nor slow. He's been in this corridor since we entered. I clocked him at the service entrance. He was coming out of the housekeeping station when we came in. That's not unusual, Garrett says quietly. No, but he's the 3rd time I've seen that same pattern since we got in the building. A staff member moving at maintenance pace through a route that doesn't have a destination. He's covering ground, not servicing it. A pause. He's been here too long. His movement pattern doesn't match anyone on a shift. It matches someone who is supposed to look like they belong while they wait. Garrett watches the man for another 30 seconds. The corridor turns ahead, and the staff member rounds the corner without stopping, without checking anything, or without performing any of the tasks that a maintenance or housekeeping circuit would produce. He pulls out his phone and texts Marshall. Medical Center West Service Corridor. Gray admin uniform. Need a visual confirm on badge registry for this wing. Last 2 hours. Marshall's reply takes 90 seconds. Badge log shows 4 admin role entries West Service this morning. 3 match scheduled housekeeping. 4th entry, timestamp, 9:14. Badge code matches a suspended credentials flag from a terminated staff member. Active 3 weeks ago. Active 3 weeks ago. The same window Amara's tracking data begins. He shows her the message without a word. She reads it. Her jaw tightens once. The specific muscular response of someone who has just seen their inference confirmed and finds no satisfaction in it. They needed someone inside, she says quietly. Not just for today. This has been in place for weeks. Someone who already knew the layout, already had access, already understood how to move through this building without attracting attention. She glances back down the corridor where the man has disappeared around the corner. He's not here to observe. He's here to open something. A door, Garrett says. A door, or a system, or a protocol. She looks at him. Whatever they built toward, whatever the real operation is, it needed inside access to get to the final step. The transit network was misdirection. The service corridor at the hub was misdirection. This man is the actual mechanism. They move. The corridor turns and turns again. And the building reveals itself in the unhurried way that large institutional spaces do when you move through them at the pace of someone who belongs there. A freight elevator on the left, stairwell access at the far end, the gentle hum of HVAC and equipment that never sleeps. Huck's attention sharpens. His pace doesn't change, but the quality of his movement shifts, the nose dropping, then rising, the ears repositioning. He is tracking a scent now, not just monitoring a space. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. The stairwell between them is empty, and the echo of their steps is the only sound until they reach the 4th floor landing door, and Garrett puts his hand flat against it and listens. Nothing from the other side, which could mean it is clear, or could mean whatever is happening on the other side is too controlled to generate noise. Amara checks her tablet. She has the hospital's publicly available floor plan pulled up, administrative wing, 4th floor, overlaid with her own annotations from the research she has been doing. She points to a location 50 feet down the corridor behind this door. Transfer unit, she says. The access is badge controlled. The room itself is rated for protective custody protocol. Soundproofed, hardwired communication, independent ventilation. Independent ventilation, Garrett says. Someone who wanted to place something in the air, handling for that room, would need access to the ventilation control panel, which is... She traces her finger along the floor plan. In the utility room, 12 feet to the left of the unit door. Not the door, Garrett says. The air. She nods once. Garrett thinks about the device in the toolkit. A signal disruption. Isolate the car. Prevent anyone inside from communicating out. Not destructive. Precise. The same logic applied to a sealed room with independent ventilation, something that affects the occupant of that room specifically, quietly, in a way that looks like a medical event rather than an action. He looks at Huck. Huck is staring at the door. Not with the full-body tension of the transit concourse, with something more focused, a fixed, low-intensity alert that says the information is there, confirmed, and has been for the last 60 seconds. He is pointing. Garrett opens the door. The 4th floor corridor is quiet in the way that medical floors at midday are quiet. not empty, but operating at the reduced tempo between rounds, the specific lull of an institution running at its own pace. A nurse at the far end of the corridor, moving away. A medication cart against the wall. The muted sound of a television from behind one of the patient room doors. The door to the utility room, 12 feet left of the transfer unit, is closed. But the latch plate is scratched around the edges, recently, not from age, in the precise pattern left by a tool that has been used to hold a spring latch open while the door closes, a technique that leaves no access record because no badge was used. Amara sees it before he points it out. She looks at the door, then at the transfer unit door beyond it, sealed and silent, its indicator light showing green, occupied, secured, protocol active. She looks at Garrett with something in her expression that is not fear and not satisfaction. It is the expression of someone who has just reached the end of a road they have been walking for 3 weeks and found that it ends exactly where they were afraid it would. They needed someone invisible, she says, someone who could move through the building without anyone thinking twice, someone who had been here long enough that the staff stopped registering him. A beat. He's already in the utility room. Huck growls. It is low, sustained, and utterly without ambiguity. Not a warning to a potential threat. The identification of a confirmed one. The dog is looking at the utility room door, and he does not look away. And in the quiet corridor, with the television murmuring from behind a distant door, and the indicator light on the transfer unit burning its steady green. The sound of it is the most specific thing in the world. So Garrett's hand finds the door handle. "Ready?" he says. "We were already here," Amara says. "We've been getting here for 3 weeks." He opens the door. The utility room is small, the kind of space that exists in every large institutional building, not designed for occupancy, but for access. A junction point where the mechanical infrastructure of the building becomes briefly reachable by human hands. Pipe runs along the upper wall. A ventilation control panel is mounted on the far side, gray metal, with a hinged front panel that has been opened and left that way. The overhead light is off. The man standing at the ventilation panel turns when the door opens. He is not the gray uniformed staff member they followed through the corridor. He is older, mid-50s, with the kind of physical economy that belongs to someone who has kept themselves functional rather than impressive, someone for whom the body is a working instrument and has been maintained as such for a long time. He is wearing hospital-issue scrubs in the pale blue of the clinical staff, and he has a laminated badge at his chest, and he holds in his right hand a slim metal canister, pharmaceutical grade, the kind with a regulated valve and a nozzle attachment, connected by a short length of flexible tubing to an open port in the ventilation panel. He has not attached the other end yet. He looks at Garrett, then at Amara, who is slightly behind and to Garrett's left, then at Huck, who has come through the door at Garrett's right with the forward-weighted, ears-flat positioning of a dog that has already done its calculation and arrived at a conclusion. The man does not move. He does not perform surprise, does not perform alarm. He simply looks at them with the particular stillness of someone who has been in situations that did not go according to plan before and has made a durable peace with that possibility. Then he says evenly, "You weren't supposed to figure it out this early." His voice is unhurried, not arrogant, something more considered than arrogance. The tone of someone making an observation that is simply accurate, the way you would note that a weather front arrived ahead of the forecast. Garrett stays in the doorway, one hand on the doorframe, his body positioned to block the exit without performing the block overtly. Huck is still controlled, so waiting on the word that has not been given. "Set the canister down," Garrett says. The man looks at it, then back at Garrett. He does not set it down. "You know what this is." "I know what it does." "Then you know that calling this in the way you're about to call it in creates a chain of events that exposes things your federal contacts would prefer stay unexposed." He says it without threat. Clinically, the way you present a variable in an equation. The asset in that room is not simply a witness. He is carrying information about an operation that two federal agencies have been running in parallel without informing each other. The moment his testimony is entered into record, both operations collapse. So your solution was to silence him, Amara says. The man turns his gaze to her. It is not the glance of someone dismissing a secondary presence. It is a full, recalibrating attention, the kind that means the person has been identified as a variable that matters. You're the one I didn't account for, he says. You keep saying that as if it explains something, she says. He looks at her for a moment with something that is almost genuine curiosity, the expression of a professional who has encountered an unexpected method and wants to understand it even under these circumstances. How did you map it? The transit pattern. Our movement data was clean. 3 separate analysts looked at it. Your analysts were looking for surveillance, Amara says. I wasn't surveilling you. I was watching the system you were moving through and reading how it changed when you were in it. A pause. You don't leave footprints, but you leave ripples. The man absorbs this. Then, very slightly, he nods. A single acknowledgement, not of defeat, but of something more precise. The acknowledgement of a method. He is still holding the canister. There's a trigger, he says to Garrett. He reaches into the pocket of his scrubs with his free hand, slowly, with the deliberate transparency of someone who knows how that movement reads and is choosing to perform it clearly, and brings out a small device. A transmitter, flat and black, the size of a lighter. If I release pressure on this, it activates. Your dog takes me down, and my hand opens. Same outcome. Garrett reads the device, reads the man's hand around it, reads the distance. Dead man's switch, he says. Simplest design is the most reliable, the man says. The space in the room contracts, not physically, but in the particular way that standoffs contract, where the number of available futures narrows down to a point, and the people in the space are aware of exactly how many of those futures are acceptable and how many are not. Huck has not moved. His hackles are fully raised, his weight completely forward, and there is a quality to his stillness that Garrett recognizes as the milliseconds before commitment. The last moment before a decision that has already been made becomes visible. Amara is quiet. Then she says, "You're not the last layer." The man looks at her. Whatever you're protecting, the parallel operation, the agency exposure, the collapse of the testimony chain, you are not the last mechanism in that protection. You are on-site management. There is a structure above you that already has contingencies for this scenario. A pause. Which means you are also expendable. If this room becomes a documented incident, your organization will not defend you. They will produce a narrative in which you acted alone and outside authorization. You know this. The man is very still. You didn't come here because you believe in what you're protecting, she says. You came here because you were the most capable person available for this specific task, and you accepted it. That's different from conviction. And people acting from capability rather than conviction. She pauses. They weigh outcomes differently when the math changes. Garrett watches the man's face. Something in it shifts. Not dramatically. A small, odd internal adjustment. The recalibration of someone running numbers that are producing an unexpected result. The hand holding the transmitter does not tighten. It holds the same pressure, but the quality of attention behind his eyes changes. Just enough. Huck launches. It is not a lunge. It is a commitment, a single continuous movement, from still to fully engaged in a fraction of a second, and it covers the 6 feet between them before the man's nervous system can complete the signal it begins to send to his hand. The dog's weight hits the man's right side and the canister goes to the floor. It skids but does not rupture, the valve closed, the nozzle detached, and Huck's grip on the jacket shoulder brings him down against the ventilation panel and holds him there with the flat, unarguable authority of 115 pounds of precision-trained working dog. The transmitter skitters across the floor. Garrett is on it in 2 steps. He picks it up, and then he stands over the man on the floor and looks at the device in his hand, and looks at the man's face. And what he sees there is not the smile of the transit operative. It is something different, something quieter. "You hesitated," Garrett says. "She changed the math," the man says from the floor. The words come out measured, almost thoughtful, as if he is genuinely reporting a phenomenon. Garrett takes the canister from where it lies and places it against the far wall, away from the ventilation panel. Then he crouches beside the man and secures his wrists. Huck releases his hold and steps back, then sits. He is breathing slightly harder than usual. His ears are still up, his attention still on the man, but the deep body tension of the committed approach has eased into the firm, watchful composure of a job completed. Amara has moved into the room fully now. She is standing beside the open ventilation panel, looking at the port where the canister would have been attached, looking at how close it was, looking at what was 3 minutes away from happening in the room on the other side of this wall. "The witness," she says. "Safe," Garrett says, already typing. He sends 2 texts simultaneously, one to Marshall, one to Brady, each with the room number, a photograph of the canister and the man on the floor, and the words, "4th floor utility, west of transfer unit, come now." Then he calls Brady directly, and Brady answers before the first ring has finished. "I need federal protection assets at the 4th floor transfer unit," Garrett says. "Right now. The threat is contained, but the protocol needs resetting. There's been a compromised staff credential operating in the building for weeks, and the full access trail needs to be pulled." Brady says something short and urgent, and the line goes active with the particular shift in background sound that means a secondary channel is being opened. Garrett stands and looks at the man, who is sitting with his back against the ventilation panel and his secured wrists in his lap, and who looks up at Garrett with the expression of someone who has arrived, finally, at the end of something. "You said he's not just a witness," Garrett says. "You said he's carrying information about a parallel operation." "That information will come out now regardless," the man says. He says it without particular bitterness. "That was always the second outcome." "The network," Garrett says. "How many nodes?" The man looks at him for a long moment. "More than this," he says. And then he smiles briefly, without warmth. Not the smile of victory, and not the smile of defeat, but the smile of someone who has left the other person with exactly the amount of information he intended to leave them with, and no more. The corridor outside fills with sound. Footsteps at pace, the specific cadence of people moving with authority toward a location they have been given. Brady's assets, or Marshall's, or both. In the room beyond the wall, the federal witness is alive, intact, and unaware of how close the past hour had come to producing a very different result. Garrett steps back and lets the room begin to fill with the people whose job it is to process what has happened here. He looks at Amara. She is standing at the ventilation panel, and she has not moved since she looked at the port, and her face is doing something careful and internal that he recognizes from years of watching people in the immediate aftermath of things that nearly went another way. She is processing. She is measuring the distance between what happened and what almost happened, and finding that it is smaller than she would like. He doesn't say anything yet. He just stands near enough that she knows he is there, and he waits. It takes about 40 seconds. Then she looks up at him, and her face has completed whatever it needed to complete. And she says quietly, "He was in there." "He was in there," Garrett confirms, "and we were the only reason he's still—" "Yes." She looks at the canister against the far wall. at Huck, sitting calmly between them in the small, crowded utility room, as if this is simply the next natural place he has been asked to be. "Okay," she says for the second time, but this one sounds different from the first. Less like steadying, more like arrival. 3 days later, in the middle of the afternoon, the news runs a segment that lasts 4 minutes and 40 seconds. The anchor describes a disrupted operation at a major transit hub and a related security incident at a university medical center, both attributed to ongoing federal coordination efforts. The word "prevented" appears twice. The word "who" appears 0 times in reference to anyone who was not a uniformed federal employee. There is stock footage of the transit hub, stock footage of the hospital exterior, a statement from a federal spokesperson that says a great deal of words while communicating a small amount of information. The segment ends, and the next story begins. Amara watches it on her laptop in the apartment she shares with her guardian from her usual position on the couch with her legs elevated, which is where she goes when the day has cost more than the average day. The tablet with her annotated transit map is on the cushion beside her. She has not opened it since they left the hospital. Her guardian, so Loretta, a woman in her early 60s who moves through the apartment with the unhurried competence of someone who has been managing difficult situations for a long time and has stopped being surprised by them, sits in the armchair across the room and watches the segment without comment. Then she watches Amara. "Is that yours?" Loretta asks. Meaning the segment? Meaning the prevented and the federal coordination, and the 4 minutes and 40 seconds that don't mention anyone who looks like the two of them. "Some of it," Amara says. Loretta is quiet for a moment. "More than some." Amara looks at her screen. "They won't say it publicly. It's complicated. There's an active investigation, and the witness testimony has implications for 2 separate agencies. And anyone they credit becomes a potential target for whatever's still out there." She says this the way she has said most things in her life, matter-of-factly, without performing the emotion that might be available to her if she reached for it. "I understood that going in." "You didn't go in," Loretta says. "You were already in. You'd been in for 3 weeks before that man and his dog ever sat across from you on a train." Amara looks at her. Loretta has the expression she gets when she has been thinking something for a long time and has decided the moment has arrived to say it. It is not a dramatic expression. It is simply direct in the way that people who have spent their lives doing practical things are direct, without preamble, without softening, because the truth doesn't require either. "I've watched you," Loretta says. "Well, since you were 12 years old and first showed me what you could see that I couldn't, I've watched you be careful with it. Careful the way you're careful with something you've been taught to think is a problem rather than a gift. Going quiet when you saw things no one else saw. Keeping the maps to yourself. Deciding not to tell people because the last time you told someone, they looked at you like you needed something fixed." Amara doesn't speak. "That man on the train didn't look at you like you needed something fixed, did he?" A long pause. Outside, a car passes, and someone on the street is having a conversation at a volume that belongs indoors, and the refrigerator hums in the kitchen with its usual mild persistence. "No," Amara says. "His dog looked at me like I was the same kind of thing it was." Loretta nods slowly. "Good," she says, as if that is the entire assessment, and in some ways it is. Garrett comes to the apartment 4 days after the hospital. He doesn't call ahead. He texts, which Amara has learned is his version of calling ahead, a heads-up of 12 minutes delivered while he is already on his way. Huck is with him. He brings coffee for himself and, having registered what she ordered at the diner, the correct tea. They sit at the kitchen table while Loretta makes herself scarce in the practiced, dignified way of someone who has decided this conversation is not hers and has somewhere else she needs to be, regardless. There are no cameras. There is no ceremony. He sets the tea in front of her, and he says, "You saved lives." She holds the cup in both hands and looks at the table for a moment. "I almost sent us to the wrong place," she says. "And you caught the correction. Not before the decoy operation was already running. Not before, Amara." He waits until she looks at him. "In 12 years of operational work, I have never seen an intelligence product built by one person, alone, without institutional support, without access to any classified system, without a single professional resource. I have never seen one that was right to the level yours was. The correction you made in real time, in the middle of an active operation, based on a pattern revision you completed in under 4 minutes. He pauses. "That is not a thing most people can do." She is quiet. "What if next time I'm wrong?" she says. "What if the correction takes 5 minutes instead of 4, and that's the difference?" "Then we prepare better," he says. "Together. We build a structure around what you can do that gives it margin, resources, contacts, verification channels, a way for what you see to move faster from your head into the world, where it can be acted on." He wraps his hand around his coffee cup. "You've been doing this alone. You shouldn't have been." "You're not offering me a job," she says. It is not quite a question. "I'm offering you a framework," he says. "What you do with it is yours." She looks at him for a moment with that characteristic quality of hers. The full attention, the reading of multiple layers simultaneously, the processing that looks like stillness from the outside. "Brady," she says. "He corroborated my data on the service corridor, quietly, through a hypothetical. That was a choice. He made it," Garrett says. "He'll make it again. He'll need to be convinced. Every time. That's who he is. But yes." A pause. "He called me after the hospital. He asked me to describe how you mapped the ventilation access from a public floor plan and a 3-week observation record." He looks at her steadily. He said the word remarkable once, and then spent 4 minutes explaining why he hadn't said it. Something crosses her face, not quite a smile, the shadow of one, the muscle movement that a smile starts with before it decides how far to go. Huck, who has been lying at Garrett's feet since they sat down, gets up. He walks the 4 feet around the table without being called, without being signaled, and he sits beside Amara's chair. Not at her feet, beside her, at the level of her arm. On the way he sits beside Garrett when they are in a space where the work is done, and what remains is simply being present in it. Amara looks down at him. She takes one hand from her cup and rests it lightly on top of his head, not the formal greeting of someone interacting with a working dog they don't know, but the absent natural gesture of someone touching a thing that belongs in their vicinity. Huck exhales once, slowly, and stays. "He's always known," Amara says softly. "Before I did," Garrett says. She looks at the tablet on the kitchen counter. The annotated map, the 3 weeks of patient solitary observation, the document that was never meant to be seen by anyone because no one had ever stayed long enough to look at it. "The network," she says. "The man in the utility room?" He said more than this. "More than this," Garrett confirms. Brady's team pulled the access trail from the hospital. The suspended credential had been used 17 times over 6 weeks across 4 different facilities, all federal adjacent, all with some connection to the witness protection infrastructure. He lets that sit for a moment. This wasn't a single operation with a single target. It's a mapped campaign against the infrastructure itself. "They're not trying to silence one witness," Amara says. "They're trying to demonstrate that witnesses can be silenced, systematically, reliably, that the infrastructure built to protect them is penetrable." He looks at her. which means the people who might testify, who are considering testifying, get the message without anyone needing to say it directly. Amara is quiet for a moment. "Well, how many nodes?" she says. "The man in the utility room said more than this. He didn't say how many more." "He didn't need to," she says. She reaches for the tablet and opens it and turns it to face him. The map is the same one. The 3 weeks of transit observation, the movement data, the thread of inference that led them through the hub and to the hospital. But she has added to it in the days since. New nodes, new lines, new clusters of notation in the margins. "I've been watching the pattern since we got back. The network didn't go dark after the hospital. It adjusted. New routing, different timing intervals. But the underlying behavioral signature is the same. The same operational fingerprints, the same coordination logic, just reorganized." Garrett looks at the map. "You've been running this since the day after," he says. "Oh, I couldn't not see it," she says. It is a simple statement of fact, not a complaint, not a boast. Just the honest description of what it is to be the person she is, to have the mind she has, to see what she sees in the movement of the world around her. He looks at the map for a long time. The new nodes, the new connections, the quiet, detailed, irrefutable architecture of something that is still building toward something else. Then he looks at her. "You're not hiding what you see anymore," he says. She thinks about that, about the years of careful smallness, the deliberate compression of the things she could do into a private practice that touched no one because no one had ever shown her that it could. About a dog on a train who looked at her and recognized something. About the 4 minutes in the middle of a transit concourse when she had to decide whether to trust that the correction she was making in real time was right, and she chose trust, and it was. "No," she says, "I'm not." Outside, the city makes its constant sound, traffic and footsteps and the distant rhythmic percussion of the subway a few blocks west, running its routes on its schedules, carrying its hundreds of thousands of passengers through the vast underground network of the city, a system so large and so complex and so continuously in motion that the only way to see it clearly is to hold the whole of it in your attention at once and be patient enough to watch for where it changes. Amara picks up her tea. Huck stays beside her. The tablet with its new nodes and its new lines glows on the kitchen table and across the city. In the unremarkable movement of ordinary-looking people going about what looks like ordinary business, something is building, but it is no longer building unobserved. A week after that, Garrett is on the subway. A different line, different time of day, a late afternoon crowd, the particular density of the city and the hour when shifts change, and errands begin. Huck is beside him. A seat opens and Garrett takes it, and Huck settles at his feet, and the train moves. At the next stop, the doors open, and a handful of people board, and Amara comes through the doors with her forearm crutches and her carbon fiber braces and her close-cropped hair and the canvas tote over her shoulder that has the tablet inside it. She always has the tablet now. Moanne, she finds him in the car and crosses to him and sits beside him without asking because there is nothing to ask. Huck does not shift into guard position. He lifts his head once, in greeting, in acknowledgement, in the simple recognition of someone arriving where they belong, and then rests it back on his paws. The train moves. Across the aisle, a man with a briefcase glances at Huck the way people glance at large dogs in confined spaces, with the specific uncertainty of someone calibrating how worried to be. He looks at Amara. "Is he safe?" the man asks. Amara looks at the man across the aisle. She looks at him the way she looks at everything, fully, without performance, seeing all of it at once. Then she looks back at the window and the tunnel moving past in the dark and the faint reflection of the car floating in the black glass. On all of them in it, going somewhere. "Only if you are," she says. The man with the briefcase considers this for a moment, decides it is probably fine, and goes back to his phone. The train runs on. The city moves above them, and below them, and all around them in its vast, indifferent orchestration, and Huck breathes steadily at their feet, and Amara opens her tablet, and the new nodes on the map glow faintly in the light of the moving train. There is work to do. There always was. If you had the ability to see danger coming before anyone else did, but no one in the world would believe you, would you still try to stop it? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. We have more stories that will stay with you long after they're over.